Chances are you know someone who has experienced some sort of hearing loss. Maybe it's a grandparent, a parent, and let's be honest, we're getting to the age where our own ears may be changing. Today's conversation with audiologist Dr. Soriya Estes offers an entirely new perspective to hearing devices and how to approach that loved one who maybe can't hear you as well as they once could. Stick around. Hey there, I'm Amy Connell. Welcome to Graced Health, the podcast for women who want simple and grace-filled ways to take care of themselves and enjoy a little chocolate in the process. I'm a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach who wants you to know your eating, movement, and body don't have to be perfect. You just need to be able to do what you are called to do. As a middle-aged woman, and I think you're right there with me, I am noticing a lot of changes in my body. My healing time whenever I get injured has decreased. I'm getting injured a little bit more often. I can't read my Bible in the morning without my readers. My hair is thinning. I mean, the list kind of just goes on and on and on. Now, I don't know about you and your girlfriends, but my girlfriends and I, when we get together, when we're allowed to get together, we talk about these things. But when was the last time we talked about our hearing? Today's episode with Dr. Soriya Estes brings new light to understanding hearing loss and finding the right device to help you hear life again, which is her company's slogan. It's Estes Audiology, and the slogan is Hear Life Again. You're going to hear that several times today. And let me tell you, if your vision of hearing aids is those beige devices that just kind of seem to whistle all the time, that's, in my world, in my language, is like envisioning group fitness classes with all of those big feathered haired women in thong leotards. Those are both way outdated. You are going to be blown away when you learn all they can do. Now, before we go further, in full disclosure, you need to know Soriya is one of my closest and dearest friends, and we actually record this in a soundproof booth in one of her offices. When I bring her on, you're going to hear us just kind of mid-awkward laughing because, let's be honest, it's kind of strange to interview your best friend, but do not let that deceive you. She brings such great wisdom and perspective on hearing loss and hearing devices, and even beat me to the big S question of shame. Why do we feel shame about our ears changing when we think it's fun to show off our new readers when we're reading our Bible even? Now, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Soriya Estes. She has extensive experience in the field of audiology and manages several private practice offices in Central Texas, as well as being a regional partner in Alpaca Group Holdings, which is the largest independently owned group of private practices. She received her master's degree in audiology from the University of Texas at Austin, and then her doctorate of audiology from Salus University. She's been a guest faculty member for the UT Austin Moody College of Speech, Language, and Hearing Science Department, served on several committees for the American Academy of Audiology. She's spoken at national and regional forums. I mean, just all kinds of great stuff. She also has a huge heart for music. She is serving as the incoming president of the Board of Trustees for 89.5 KMFA Classical Public Radio, and then is also involved with the Health Alliance for Austin Musicians, otherwise known as HAM, since 2009. She's also been called to participate in healthcare efforts in Haiti to support staff and fund hearing and health-centered mission trips annually. She does it all. She has so much information. I can't wait for you to hear her. Let's bring her on. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so do that again.
No, we're not doing this again because this is what. So I've introduced you to our listeners before we get on. One thing they need to know about us is we have been friends longer than we have not been friends.
You know, you said that earlier, and I thought, holy cow, we really have. That's crazy.
Yeah, we met when we were 18.
Yeah. Wow.
19. Something like that. and we're not
Babies.
we're not 18 or 19
We are
anymore.
definitely not.
So we've got a lot of history.
We almost have 18s and 19s instead of being 18s.
Oh my
and
gosh.
19s.
Okay, we're not going to go there right now because I know what we were doing when we were 18 and 19.
I know.
Okay, but we are not here to talk about parenting today. We're here to talk about audiology. And the reason I wanted to have you on is we're getting to this age where not only are we seeing our parents experience hearing loss, but I think some of us are as well. So we're going to get into that in a little bit. But I think it's when we're talking about our overall health, one of the things I try and do on the podcast is not just focus on fitness, which is my wheelhouse, and nutrition, but a holistic version. And hearing health is part of that.
Yeah.
So if we can back up just a little bit, tell me what drew you to audiology? Because I remember you taking classes in college.
Mm-hmm.
I consider you one of my best friends, and I don't really remember the story behind this.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit about what drew you into that.
So I was one of those crazy high school seniors that knew what I wanted to do as I went into college, and I never changed my major. So,
which is really unusual.
A little unusual. And what drew me in is that I knew I wanted to go into allied health in some sort of capacity. Music has always been a big, important part of who I am. And, I just felt a call and a draw to do something helping others. And at the time, I thought more music related. And so music therapy was actually a really kind of a hot ticker, back then. And I had investigated that. And anyway, just through my journey, found this little field called audiology. And I was like, well, this is scientific. I like science. I like sound, and it's allied health. So let's just give this a try. Part of audiology is actually back then majoring with a bachelor's degree in speech pathology. So that's where I met some of our very close friends as well in the speech pathology realm. So they are pretty much sister professions. And so, but I always wanted to go into audiology. I just found that for me, in an analytical brain, it was very scientific. It was very, kind of black and white in some portions, but now that I'm in the field and I understand all of the counseling aspects of it and what it does to your mental and emotional health, there's a lot of gray and emotions in it, but at the time I thought it was just very sciencey and health based. So that's what really started my interest, and I never deviated from that.
I know, which is really incredible, because that's not something that people typically do. And oftentimes we take our own little pivots and changes. And
sure.
I mean, I have a finance degree.
I know. I've thought about that often with you. Yeah. And I remember you and your accounting
and I loved it.
And all of that.
I did. And I loved it. And that was a great season. And my husband will tell you, I do not utilize my finance degree very much, nor the accounting classes. So you've always been an audiologist, but you've taken a few different kind of career, I don't want to say paths, but turns and all of that. And I know you spent a lot of time and you still do spend a lot of time with hearing aids. So this is my experience with hearing aids. Is I had this great uncle, and he was an amazing guy. And he was active, he was fit, he was witty until the day he died at 92. He was a 50-year member of the YMCA. He also couldn't hear, and he had these hearing aids. And he would come over, and I remember we would be like at family dinner, and my sister and I are like, what is that beeping? Or not beeping, but like that high pitched sound. And so I think that I'm probably not alone. And like, that is what people's experience with hearing aids is.
Sure.
And I remember even talking with you about it, because you were an audiologist while he was still alive.
I remember, I had forgotten about your great uncle, but now that you bring him back,
yes,
I do remember those stories about that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So over the years, you have educated me on the different kinds of hearing aids and what they do. And I think that it would be interesting to everybody to hear, just like we've had advancements in cell phones and in computers and all of that, what the advancements are in hearing aids and and I don't, am I even saying that right? Like, is it hearing assisted devices?
Right, exactly. You know, and
so educate me on that.
That's what's interesting. So at the end of the day, no matter how much I want them to trend to being called hearing devices instead of hearing aids, because I just feel like from just an overall concept and perspective, hearing aids make you think of your grandpa's old beige whistling or your great uncle's, device that really never helped him out. And he maybe wore it and maybe didn't, and just wasn't a successful experience, right? The other thing about it too is just the mentality of hearing loss. Hearing loss, hearing aids, like think of the words that we're putting to this process that's happening. They're really negative and have a negative connotation and negative stigma, and always has.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I've always found it fascinating how people will wear glasses and have the most stylish cheaters in the world, and myself included, and, really be proactive about the visibility of their vision deteriorating. But it's very shameful to have that other sense.
Did you read my notes?
No, I did not.
I have this later.
We'll just kind of spice this.
Go ahead. No. This is great. This is why we're such good friends, people.
We complete each other's thoughts and sentences and notes.
Yes.
So it's always been fascinating as I've, grown in the profession to see and understand this patient journey of, honestly, why are we getting our vision checked? The old, you're 40, you got to get your cheaters, it's going to happen to you. Why are we not being proactive about our hearing health care like we do our vision, our dental care, our mammograms, our, everything else?
Absolutely.
Why are we not putting hearing care into that? We're adults. We need to have baselines. We need to have those checks, right? And that there's getting to be less and less of a stigma and a shame on hearing loss, but it's one of our most vital senses. It captures us and it engages us. And I know I'm probably jumping forward in that, but what I see to your original question is the word hearing aids. Mm-hmm. Let's just talk about it. Let's just have the conversation. There are hearing aids out there. I want them called hearing devices, but they're hearing aids. Everybody knows them as hearing aids. Everybody knows things as glasses. That's okay. Just to understand the evolution of hearing aids. So when I was in my graduate program at UT Austin, we were taught how to adjust and control hearing aids for certain degrees of hearing loss was a little bitty screwdriver. There were two little dials on the actual device, and you had a high pass and a low pass filter on an analog circuit. And so you could, tweak the highs and tweak the lows. And I went,
yes, which is what I would see Paul doing.
Sure, exactly.
My great uncle.
And so, so we learned, analog. We're not going to go into all of the technical, design of it, but analog resistors and capacitors. And I learned how to solder on a circuit board in graduate school, but that's all we had, at the time. And so the challenge is that the actual degrees of hearing loss or configurations of hearing loss hasn't changed in the last, forever. But, since World War II, and our profession was actually World War II. After World War II is when audiology became a profession. Oh. That's just a little interesting.
That is interesting.
Right.
And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so, not to talk about the history of that, but again, this was in the late 90s that we were still in resistors and capacitors and analog circuitry of treating these really complex hearing losses and honestly not having a lot of success. Yeah. Right. They were essentially amplifiers.
Right.
They just amplified everything. So you had, the whistling and the squealing, and they didn't help when you went into a restaurant or background noise. So the whole journey was not successful at all. And quite frankly, the only reason why you saw great uncle Paul in his 80s finally getting hearing aids is because, quite frankly, he was just too severe. He couldn't hear anything at that point. So we've got to get him something.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So we didn't do anything with milder hearing losses because people just didn't want to put up with
clunkiness.
The clankiness.
Yeah.
And it just sounded bad.
Right.
It wasn't meeting their lifestyle needs. So why in the world would I put something on and use something that's not effective for me? And it has this horrible negative stigma that I'm old.
Right.
So why would I do something about it?
Right.
Okay. So that's kind of where we are with what's your perception of actual, the old beige whistling hearing aids.
Right.
So what got me interested in some of my professional journey in life is that right out of my graduate training, I went to work for an ear, nose, and throat physician and started having a clinical aspect of things. And that's really where I got my first dive into, adult oral rehab and devices and counseling, etc. One of my pivot points professionally was I then had an opportunity after spending several years in an ENT clinic model of going on the industry side of things and working for a global hearing aid manufacturer as one of their audiologists and their field supports. It just coincided at the time that is when digital processors started making their way into our world and our industry. So we had an evolution in the early 2000s of coming from analog processing into really good DSP, sound quality, etc. So
DSP,
digital signal processing.
Okay.
So going from your cassette to your CD.
Yeah.
Okay. Which I think was happening in technology in general. And so that was something that was very fascinating and an opportunity, a time and space in our industry that I had the advantage of being on industry side of things and starting to understand the research and development that goes into these chips, the ability to how to signal process things.
Right.
Not everything needs to be amplified equally. All of the things that go into R&D that make somebody be able to hear their grandchild or hear when they're in a car or hear when they're in a sanctuary or hear, when all of the family's around at Thanksgiving.
Well, I remember you telling me about a product that would recognize, and correct me if I'm wrong, it would recognize where you were looking and it would kind of amplify that, but zone everything else out. So if we were at a table and you and I were sitting across each other from the table, I could look at you and it was smart enough to go, okay, I need to hear her voice, but not the person sitting next to me, which is mind-blowing.
Right.
It's like a brain in your ear.
Right.
Which I suppose our brain is between our ears. But that's really incredible.
So 2 points on that I always say, talking about the brain, I'll address the brain first. So I always counsel that we hear with our ears, we understand with our brain. Our ears are just the messenger of sound up to the brain.
Okay.
And so it's, the brain's doing all the processing for us.
Okay.
So we're only as successful as what those nerves and that, transmission to the brain are. Like how much that patient has to give me of natural hearing, it also determines how successful we are with how the brain processes all of that. Okay. So I'm going to then back up to your first example of, the devices can actually zone in, on you. So yes, to a point, we have, it's called directional microphones or directionality, to where now we have, so a very simplistic
keep it
example.
Simple,
exactly.
I have a finance degree, remember.
So a simplistic sample is there's 2 microphones on each device, and they are working to make sure that the things that are coming in forward that are a speech signal are more prominent than maybe the things that are coming in a 180-degree radius behind us or to the sides of us. Okay.
So for that to be successful, someone needs to turn their head.
Yes, to a point.
Okay.
Depending on kind of the technology and et cetera. However, now we have multiple null points. So again, the early directional microphones only had one, what we call like blank spot, to assume that if directionality was turned on, that the loudest source was right behind you and the most important source was right in front of you.
Okay.
And that's not necessarily the case. If you're sitting around a 4-top table at a restaurant,
right,
you may want to hear somebody on one side or the other or in front of you. And so determining how that works, we now have processors that can determine that. Okay. So it has been a several decade evolution of those processors being able, that's a lot of analysis to do, to say, okay, taking these nanosecond samplings of an environment and being able to go, okay, this is speech, this is noise, this is kind of steady state speech babble. That's probably the table over here. That doesn't need to come in as much. And oh, by the way, we're also calculating on a prescriptive frequency for that patient and making sure that certain pitches are amplified more than
based
others
on
based on the hearing loss.
Right.
And the degree of hearing loss. So there's a lot of complexies that go into that.
So the message here is this is not a beige whistling amplifier. Because you lost me on a little bit of that.
I know. Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. But what I have learned from you, and then when I have had conversations with people, I mean, varying people, I'm like, it's not what we used to see in the newspaper ads anymore.
Oh gosh, no.
And I think that that's what's important to know is just like technology has increased with our phone and our cassettes and our CDs and now our MP3 and all of that, it has gotten so much better with hearing devices as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about genetic. Oh, you look like you want to say something.
I want to say one more thing about the actual processors themselves, because I do think that this is pertinent and important, is that going back to the R&D factors of this is that people often ask me, because one of the most common objections to going into hearing aids is they're so expensive.
Yeah.
Right. So it is not the little plastic and the small wire that you're paying for and investing in. You're investing in years and years of technology and research and development, and also that professional component, that goes along with all of that. So I just think that.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, because the more you know about what goes into it, then it helps to justify the cost a little bit.
I mean, if you are investing in anything, it needs to be a sound investment and something that's helping you and benefiting you in your lifestyle and in your day-to-day world. And so we have many patients that will say it is worth every dime because I'm wearing these 14 to 15 hours a day. I'm wearing them every day. I love them. They're streaming my podcast for me, in my ears, adjusted prescriptively to my hearing loss so I can have clarity too. It's worth every dollar that I've spent. Right.
Yeah, that's true. Because there's a lot of functionality on that too.
That's right.
That I know that there's out there. How much, when we talk about, so if you don't want me saying hearing loss, what would you rather me say? First of all,
I think again, we say that, our vision's getting bad and our hearing is getting bad, hearing loss. So I don't know if there's a better word, for hearing loss, but it is part of the counseling conversation that we change.
Okay.
We try to talk about the things that they would like to get back in their lives.
Okay.
So not necessarily what they've lost, but what they have to gain by better hearing.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of like the nutrition discussions.
Yes.
Don't focus on what you can't have, focus on what you can have.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. That's absolutely right.
So, so with regard to hearing loss, how much of that is preventable and how much of that is genetic?
Good question. We know that from several different national studies that are out there that the 3 leading causes of hearing loss are in this order: noise, genetics, then age.
Oh, wow. Okay.
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 And everybody always thinks I'm getting old, I have hearing loss. Like they always put age above noise and genetics, but the studies will show you that that's not the case. So noise-induced hearing loss is leading cause of hearing loss. So on the preventative side of things, just protect your ears.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit. Like, how do we know when it's too loud?
Sure. And gosh, we have lots of people on headphones now, right? And constant headphones. So when we're looking at protection, it's intensity and duration.
Okay.
So how loud it is and how long you are listening to that loud.
Okay.
Is what it is. And so 85 decibels in an 8-hour day is totally safe.
Tell me what that sounds like.
So 85 decibels, I have a graph actually.
Yes,
here.
we're actually in a sound booth right now. So it is right behind me. I'll let you explain
it. Behind you. So 85 decibels is basically like I would say like a vacuum cleaner, loud traffic. That's about an 85 decibel. When you get into a lawnmower, usually is about 90 decibels.
Okay.
Okay.
So
it's loud.
There's a margin there.
You would not enjoy listening to music for 8 hours a day at 85 decibels.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Most people wouldn't. Now, you worry about your teenagers and you're going to cause permanent hearing loss because I can hear it in the car, turn it down. It's only if they were consistently listening to it for 8 solid hours without a break.
Okay.
That's
good to know.
That they would cause some damage.
Yeah.
Okay. However, what's the staggering thing is I said 85 for 8 hours. If you increase that to 90, it cuts your listening time in half.
Wow.
So
okay.
only 5 decibels cuts your listening time in half to 4 hours. So 95 would be only 2, and 100 decibels, which 100 decibels is like most concerts, sporting events.
Okay.
It's 1 hour before it can possibly start doing some damage.
Wow.
And a gunshot, it would only take 1 gunshot sometimes. That's over 120, depending on the caliber of gun.
Okay.
To do permanent damage, like never coming back.
Okay. Well, let's talk about hearing protection. The first time I remember seeing like intentional someone protecting someone, you're smiling. I wonder if you know where I'm going with this, is years ago when Drew Brees was the quarterback of the New Orleans Saints, and I think he's still there. And I think he has like 1 million kids now, but he had one little boy who was like so 2, cute. And he had those headphones on.
Yep.
And that to me is the first time that I ever saw someone taking that real intentional action. And then after that, like,
oh yeah,
my friend used to send her kids to whatever the big truck shows are, monster
trucks.
Like with that, and so you started seeing that. But like I love concerts, and I know you're really involved with musicians here in Austin.
Correct.
So let's talk a little bit about like if we're going to a concert, how can we protect our hearing?
Sure.
Or how can we protect our ears without feeling like a dork?
Yep.
And I know we don't care as much anymore about looking like a dork, but we still kind of care. Because you put a lot of effort into the clothes that you're going to wear.
Of course. And then, I've got these foamy, ugly,
right,
yellow earplugs sticking out of my ears. So, I love that, and I may live in my Austin bubble of, us supporting live local music and us also really protecting our ears too. But there are some, without going into details of all the different types of products, there are some really good, going to a concert, filtered products. And if you just, go to Dr. Google and say, filtered earplugs, there are some small, really discreet earplugs that still allow music and sound to come in at a good quality.
Okay, so it's not muffled.
It's not muffled. So the challenge with, I applaud anybody that's protecting their ears. And by the way, Kleenex and cotton is not protecting your ears. Can I just make that disclaimer? It's not sealing off. Those sound waves are getting through that.
Okay. Good to know.
But to get a kind of your standard either orange or yellow foam plug and put it in your ears, good for you. That's important and that's smart. And if you're dealing with some loud guns and things like that, you really should protect that. If you want to enjoy music and concerts and loud things, having some filtration to where the music comes in and it doesn't sound muffled still just turns that down. So instead of listening to a concert at 100 decibels, you're listening to it at, 85 decibels because you've put in a filtered plug that filters 15 decibels down.
Which just extended the life.
It's just extended the...
by 6 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So you're able to, people come in and go, I know I shouldn't be around noise. I know I shouldn't be around noise. Sure, be around noise. I go to concerts, I'm around guns every once in a while or fireworks. I just do it safely and I just filter and turn it down. So
So that's something you can get just off of Google. Just Google filtered earplugs.
You can.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. You have explained to me before the concept of tired ears. Mm-hmm. So someone appears to I think the hearing is starting to go, and they'll say, well, I went to they told me that my hearing is just fine.
Right.
And you said, well, they're tired. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Right. So on the tired ears, there's two things about that. So let's go back to the hearing protection side of things and the concert side of things. So we've all gone to concerts. We've all left with that little wee sound in our ears, and everything sounds dull and flat. We've got to turn the radio up a little bit in the car as we're driving home. It just doesn't sound right. It sounds real muffled. We give our ears an 8-hour break of rest, and then all of a sudden everything sounds normal again. And that little wee has gone away. Okay. Well, that's a temporary fatigue in your hearing. You have beaten up your high frequency hair cells. I'm not going to go into the anatomy of the ear. You've beaten up your high pitched hair cells with loud sounds, with unprotected sound, and they're just kind of screaming back at you. And it's not that little wee nobody else can hear, but it's tinnitus, and it's a temporary tinnitus, and it'll go away. Okay. Because you've given your ears some rest. But that muffled and that not able to hear, that's because your ears are fatigued. They're just being beat up by that noise. Okay. So it's called a temporary threshold shift. But if you do it time and time and time again, guess what? Those little nerves, their hair, they're tiny little nerves. They just get tired and they're not as resilient. They're like any other nerve in your body. They're just not as resilient if you're going to beat them up and if you're not going to protect them. And so that's part of nerve fatigue, is that it will they'll just stop popping up, and it'll be the beginnings of some hearing loss, some permanent hearing loss. Okay. So if you're somebody that's an active concert goer, if you're an active, you go to these often, then instead of, doing like an over-the-counter kind of, non-custom Google search, you definitely can get some custom hearing protection that's really more fit for you and doesn't make you look like a nerd when you go out. But Amy, you never look like a nerd going out. So what can do that? So this just ears are tired concept is, it's almost once you start having a mild degree of hearing loss, even a mild degree of hearing loss, studies will show in certain pitches of speech sounds that you focus more, you squint more. Right? Okay. Because you're just trying to focus on that conversation. You're just trying to, it's just not coming in. You're not giving your brain 100% anymore. And so you just have to focus. And so you do get tired and you feel like, oh, I'm just not hearing as well as I used to hear. Okay. And that's the time to come in. The challenge is, what's normal? What's normal to want? Hearing does not work on a 20/20 vision scale, like a 20/20 vision scale. Okay. It's kind of a range of normal. So you kind of have to take the objective test and the subjective communication complaints to see
and put it together.
Okay. Right.
Okay. So, you and I are 45, and many people in our age group are starting to have parents who are not hearing as well. And all they know is the beige whistling.
Yep.
And, I think, and to your point earlier, there's still a stigma of wearing hearing aids. So what can we do as, adult children to help our parents take that step? Or what kind of messaging or communication or education can we do to get them to go in and maybe explore an option?
Yeah. Well, I would also extend that to we're of an age that it's parents and possible spouses that that are seeing some struggles and challenges.
You definitely read my notes because I wanted
to. I did not read your notes.
Well, because I want. Okay, well, in the same conversation, then let's talk about our age, because I think we're starting to see that as well, and it might even be us who's all of a sudden I don't know that I can hear. I mean, some of us have selective hearing sometimes and blame it.
Yes, they do.
So that's not what we're talking about.
my running joke is, and you can edit this out if you need to, but my running joke is that selective listening is on the Y chromosome. There's absolutely no cure for it. It is a genetic, scientific based problem, and throwing a remote control does not help. But in jest of that, a lot of hearing losses occur in the high frequencies where more female voice components are found.
Yes.
And so it's very, very common for the wife to be dragging the husband in and saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm so tired of repeating myself because he just can't understand me." But he can understand his buddies, but he just can't understand me. And it's actually because of the type of hearing loss. But I always we sometimes need another degree in marriage counseling from all of the spousal support that we do with communicative, just strategies in nature. So your question about how to
get a loved one.
So that's the thing, is that when you're seeing somebody struggle with hearing loss, it's how to broach that subject, because it's a very again, we still have some shame around, "Oh, I'm getting old and they're saying I can't hear and I'm hearing just fine." You don't have to be deaf to have a hearing loss.
Right.
And family members are doing it with good intentions. They don't want somebody missing out. They don't want somebody missing out on grandkids and on phone calls and, going over to mom and dad's and always reaching right for the TV to turn it down because we need to have a conversation and the TV's blaring. How to approach that subject is still tricky. I think, though, that the stigma is becoming less and less as these devices are becoming much more tech savvy, and sometimes depending on that loved one, spouse or parental figures of, I'm going to I think that there's some generational things here that I should probably talk about. Okay.
Yeah.
So, there's some generational motivations. What I see in our boomer generation is our boomer generation does not want to become either the parents or the grandparents that they saw struggling with hearing loss and struggling with those old beige things and losing out and seeing that, I just don't even want to talk to dad anymore. He just sits in the recliner and naps while the family all gathers around because he never wears his hearing aid. And he just didn't get to participate in conversation, right? Our boomer generation does not want to become that, right?
Right.
And our boomers are much more proactive in their health. Much more proactive, right? Just in general.
I see that in my parents. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They want to keep an edge. They are willing, our boomers are willing to invest in their health because, they don't see themselves as 70, 75. 75 is so young now.
Yeah.
It's a very different mindset than our greatest or senior generation that we see of that generation. So our boomers' parents, our parents, they were taught, they were depression And they were, it's not bad enough.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right?
I had never put that together.
Very different.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yeah. If you really don't need it, then you don't.
It's not that bad.
Right.
It's not that bad.
Right.
I will have 90 plussers come in, never experienced, treatment of hearing loss, and say, well, is it really that bad? As like me and the adult child are like yelling at them about their results, so it's, I think we really need to be cognizant of the generation that we're counseling and the generation that you may be approaching of what, and so let's say to like our parents who are boomer parents, and I know your parents well, I just don't want hearing loss slowing you down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because that's the other thing that I was wondering if you could help us out with, is giving us some language to talk to our loved ones. Because, I just talked about this with a guy regarding the fitness industry, but, our beloved Brene Brown has taught us that shaming people does not create change.
Of course
and
not.
so saying, I can't hear you, we can't go out to restaurants because you can't hear anything. I mean, like, as we're learning about the human psychology, we know that this is not what is going to get them to see someone like you or you. So what is some of the positive, impactful language you have seen or you recommend?
So one thing that I have seen time and time again is there is almost always, more often than not, an emotional driver that will finally get someone to that point of, okay, it's time.
Okay.
And it could be my grandson just turned away from me again and went to go talk to grandma instead of grandpa because grandpa can't hear him.
Okay.
Or I am really fearful because I missed that number in that board meeting again. And I'm afraid they're going to have me in some sort of early retirement because I just couldn't hear anymore, what was going on.
Or maybe they don't,
or I
like they're embarrassed to ask.
Absolutely.
Or something like
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
So there's emotional drivers. I've never seen somebody successfully enter into, treatment of hearing loss because they just told me to do it.
Right.
Right? Because
there's a lot of things that we could say.
Yes,
about that.
I mean, yes. I think that so I have had many a spouse or many an adult child get really upset with me when I will counsel a family on, yes, she has hearing loss, and yes, she could definitely be helped and assisted with hearing aids and devices that will allow her to hear all of these things, and she's not ready yet.
Oh, because they want you to be like in their corner.
Yep.
Yes.
In their corner, being their advocate. And they're like, well, price is not an option, and we're going to pay for it, and we just want her. She's not ready yet.
Okay.
And, I make I'm pretty adamant about, I don't want my hearing aids ending up in a drawer. I want people successfully engaged back in their life. Mm-hmm. And so we need to plant these seeds, and we need to counsel, and we as professionals need to tell the hard, the hard truth. People, I can tell from body language the minute that somebody comes in and they have their arms crossed and they're looking down and they're not even making eye contact, and the loved one is giving me all the case history. I'm like, yeah, that person just doesn't even, they're just not ready yet. But it's important for us, even if they're not ready, it's important for us to tell them what they're missing and what opportunities they have to regain in their life, and just counsel on that. So much of this is a mental acceptance of, I miss the things that I don't, have anymore in communication. Communication connects us. We're a connective species. We want to engage. We want to talk. I mean, you and I have been nonstop talking for, I think, 72 hours.
Yes. Well, and I think this is a good time to say that your slogan is "Hear Life Again."
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I think speaks volumes to what your goal for your patients is to hear it and to re-engage and reconnect. Yeah.
That's
So
right.
so what you're saying then, if we're struggling to get a loved one to either have their hearing tested or take the next step, it's meet them somewhere emotionally, and
Right.
maybe, gosh, I don't. This is where I need some help.
Yeah. To just say, I really, I really see that you didn't enjoy that, that dinner out with Greg and Susan, or whoever,
Uh-huh.
I really see you didn't enjoy that. I know you're missing some things. Depending on that type of person, it's calling out what they're missing, or that they didn't enjoy things. And I wish you could enjoy those things. I know there's some really good options.
But without adding the shame.
Of, you just can't hear me and I'm tired of repeating, and kind of making it about you, because that's
okay. Make it more about what they can get back.
They can get back. Make it
Okay.
more about what, you are observing them missing out on, not about how much you have to repeat or how loud, you want the television down, or, it's just engaging them.
Yeah.
The other factor that is motivating a lot of times for different people is the fact that, and you do such an amazing job of reminding us to get our body in movement and body in motion, and working all of our connective tissues. Well, our hearing nerves work by being stimulated just like any other nerve in our body. And so if we're depriving our nerve of stimulation by not treating hearing loss, it starts atrophying.
Okay. So if someone is at, and I don't know the technicalities, but say someone comes in and they have a 10% hearing loss. I don't even know if that's how you do it, but I'm just, again, this is going back to my numbers,
to my number. Totally fine.
Can you kind of stop or slow down the hearing loss by adding a hearing device?
Okay. Great question. So the nerve itself may continue, again, with a genetic hearing loss. Let's just take a genetic hearing loss or an age-related hearing loss. The nerve itself may slowly continue to deteriorate, right? Mm-hmm. However, if we add amplification, then, and I'm using my hands because I'm such a hand talker, so I'll try to communicate it in words too. We can always turn up the volume. We can always make things louder so that nerve can have the signal to fire to the brain.
Okay. What
we start losing if we don't keep stimulating is the signal to the brain. How it fires. How it fires. Because again, you've got a weakened, atrophied nerve that hasn't been working. And then all of a sudden, you're turning up this big sound and saying, work. And the brain's like, what in the world? I haven't heard this in a long, long time.
Yeah. Okay.
An analogy I use that I hope you will appreciate is if you had your leg in a cast for 10 years, mm-hmm. and you took that cast off, because a lot of times hearing loss can go on for 3, 5, 10 years.
Yeah, you told me the other day that it's oftentimes between 3 and 5 years from when you start noticing it to when you actually do something about it.
Right. So let's take a 5-year analogy instead of a 10-year analogy. If you had your leg in a cast for 5 years, and then you took that cast off and expected to run around the block.
Right. That wouldn't work.
Right. And would that leg ever completely work like you remember it working before? Right. So our hearing nerve is just like that. So the sooner you start treating and stimulating the nerve, even if you still have some deteriorated hearing loss over time, the connection and the synapses between the nerve and the brain are still working. They're still going.
Okay.
Still going. So we can always make sound, louder, but the nerve and the brain are what determine the clarity.
So there's really kind of two components here. I'm sure there's more than that, but you're talking about like where it receives and then
how it processes
which is what you were saying earlier.
That's right.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And to me, knowing that is incentive. Like if I was here last time I was here, we came in because I said I couldn't hear.
Yeah, exactly.
And apparently I can. So it's not my fault that I can't hear you.
Hearing and processing are two different things.
That's true.
Amy.
I hear you fine. There was one person who was like, "Your hearing is..." Anyway.
Maybe it's on the double X chromosome in your family. I don't
know. No. Oh, I lost my train of thought. But it's incentive to take the step rather than just letting it go and go and go.
That's right.
So to me too, this almost sounds like sounds similar to someone like with rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah.
Where you can stop the progression of that, or slow it down, but you need to get on it before it gets too bad. Because it will never get better.
Exactly. And then also, to take it even more step forward is untreated hearing loss. There was a very fascinating study, and I want to say the year that it came out, but because of the 2020 that we're in, I can't remember the year. I think it was in 18. But there was a very fascinating study that directly linked hearing loss to untreated hearing loss to advances in Alzheimer's and dementia.
Wow.
And if you think about it, and audiologists, by the way, have known this for a long time.
Just
anecdotally a long time. But if you think about it, like your ears are the messenger to keep your brain active and conditioned. And we also know from other studies that hearing loss is one of the leading causes of anxiety and depression in people over 65. And so with social regression, and basically we're just hearing like this and just hearing really muffled. Your brain does not get those synapses and just doesn't keep working.
Yeah.
And, then you socially regress and you say, it's not worth going to that restaurant. I never hear there. And it's not worth going here. Oh, I never hear her. Or I never hear them. And all of a sudden you're shutting down.
Yeah.
And so the concern over, again, going back to don't let hearing loss slow you down. I don't want it to neurologically affect me long term.
Yeah.
And overcoming
that's really powerful too. Because I think too, when you think about Alzheimer's and dementia, it seems like that was really first made aware in our parents.
Yes.
Parents.
Yes.
And that was when we first really started learning about it. And there's so much science behind it, but they're very aware.
That's right.
I don't want that to happen to me.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So if you're struggling with that with your parents, dear listeners,
yes,
that might be a good little statistic to throw out.
It really is. And I will think, and it's not a fear factor. It is a factual, phenomenon that happens. And I'd want to challenge and say, did those loved ones that had Alzheimer's and dementia, do they also have hearing loss? And the correlations around that. They are pretty vast, and we didn't know that at the time. We don't know what we don't know. Now we know.
Yeah.
And so now we can absolutely do preventative on that.
Sure.
That's just a preventative care.
I know that we're sitting in 2020 and you can't think of it off the top of your head. Is that something that you could find for me and I could link in the show notes? Okay. She's nodding. Yes.
I can.
Awesome. Okay. Last question. What do you wish people understood more about either their hearing loss or going to an audiologist, or you're like, if I could just say one thing, this is what it would be?
God, that's such a good question. So the one thing that I really want to tout is that your hearing journey is a journey, and your communicative process is not just about the hearing aid and the widget. Knowing and trusting and understanding that there is a professional and clinical and counseling component will help so much in assuring that you are successful long term.
Okay.
So nobody, again, when you have hearing loss, I don't think it's always the case of you need to go see an audiologist, right? I think it's you need to go get a hearing aid.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'm kind of reading between the lines. And so what you're saying as well is get to someone who can help you integrate everything.
All of the things.
And counsel and understand,
Yes.
and not just go get something that's going to amplify.
That's right. That's right. Because there's so many components and there's so many individualities. It's about your lifestyle. It's about, as you've heard on this, it's about the generation that you're in and your motivating factors and why you do things and not do things in your life. But it's also communication tips and loved one supports. We spend an hour in an initial consultation, and the testing actually takes about 10 minutes.
Yeah. Because you just want to get to know them.
You just
to meet their needs.
To meet their needs, and to also give those communication strategies, those techniques. So I guess the takeaway from me is I strongly believe in the professional component of treating hearing loss and not just the device itself. If you have knee replacement surgery, you need to trust your surgeon that's going to be performing the surgery, and you probably don't know the brand of the actual thing that's going in your body for the rest of your life.
And then you also need physical therapy.
And then you need
and you provide all of that.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Like it's ongoing care for that successful treatment, and not just the transactional, I'm going to go buy a hearing aid because, I need them to shut up.
All right. Hey, thank you for doing this.
So fun.
Yes, it is fun. And thank you for opening up your office and letting us come in the sound booth and doing all of that. And
I know. It's very quiet in here.
It is very quiet. I know. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Amy.
I told you she was good. Man, I have some of the smartest friends. Gosh, they're amazing. I really hope this gave you not only solid facts about hearing devices, but also understanding the counseling and the psychology component behind it. And that's so important. If you know someone who might like to learn a little bit more in maybe a non-threatening environment, send them this episode. If they don't listen to podcasts or don't even have the app, because I know some don't, you can always listen to it on my website at www.gracedhealth.com/Soriya. That's SORIYA-Estes, ESTES. I will have that in the show notes. So you can go there and listen straight from the browser. Hey, if you dig the show, I invite you to sign up for my monthly journals. You'll receive a summary of all the shows released every month, but just in one email a month. Plus, I share recipes and workouts and music and shows and all kinds of other things that I have been really enjoying myself over the past month. I make a list like all month long. I'm like, ooh, I want to tell them about this, and I want to tell them about this. So I try and really give you some things that I think that you will enjoy as much as I do. And I will make you a deal, because I know email addresses are sacred to us and we do not want to share them and for people to abuse them. So if you will sign up for the monthly journal, I promise to respect your precious email, because I'm protective of mine too, and I will not overload you with emails that don't serve you. What's the one simple thing I want you to remember? I do this on almost every episode. So one simple thing, let's take away the shame of needing a hearing device and enlist the help of an audiologist to create a customized plan to help you or your loved one hear life again. Okay, that's all for today. Go out there and have a great day.